One, there's only one game in town, which is you bet your life, right? That's the only game worth playing. And two, the point of all that is that if your life is an art and your art isn't your life, what are you doing here?
I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step.
Just let go.
Hey everyone, little personal update here. My family and I are moving to Austin, Texas, and we could not be more excited. We'll be boots on the ground here in about a week and a half. So if you're in the Austin area, hope to connect with you at some point live and in person. And I'm literally sitting here with my super coffee, my blueberry latte super coffee that just came out. Not sure if you've tried it yet, but it tastes like blueberry pancakes. And Super Coffee is actually located in Austin, Texas as well. And if you haven't heard yet, you can get a 25% discount off of anything on the drinksupercoffee.com website. So try out that blueberry latte. I can tell you it's delicious. And before I announce our guest today, who I'm a big fan of and have been for quite some time, I want to give you a heads up. Our summer enrollment to the Renegade Accelerator is opening very soon. If you want first access, head to renegadeaccelerator.com and you can sign up for the emails. You'll be the first to know. We are all about 10xing your thinking, 10xing your income, and really shifting your relationship with time and money. Our curriculum includes the topics of partnerships, podcasting, productizing your intellectual property, growing and building your personal brand online. We cover wealth creation, investing, all types of different facets. But the biggest thing is this community of renegade women, leaders, executives, founders who create this mosaic of just like-minded, like-hearted women. It's amazing what they've been able to create over the years, and it just continues to grow. So if you want more information, just go to renegadeaccelerator.com and check out the video on the homepage. That's where you will hear from the renegades themselves, their results, their experience. We're going to be opening enrollment very, very soon. In fact, if you want to submit your application right now, you can go ahead and do that. So heads up on that front. And today we have Stephen Kotler on the show. He's a New York Times bestselling author, award-winning journalist. He's the executive director of the Flow Research Collective. I originally became aware of Stephen when he spoke at Summit series up in Utah, and he had just come out with The Rise of Superman, a book that he had written. He's written many books over the years, but he has a philosophy and an approach to flow state and research to back it up that's just unmatched. And he's a fascinating character. You will hear why I think that in this episode based on our conversation. It's wide-ranging. One of the smartest individuals I think I've ever had the chance to speak with. Definitely a valuable chat. So get ready for that. And without further ado, here is Stephen. Stephen, welcome to the Why Not Now show. Thank you for joining me. And in the spirit of Why Not Now, let's hop right in. Can you tell me about a time when you had a big decision to make and you asked yourself, why not now? We'll dissect that day, minute, hour, season, take a look under the hood, and really understand how you navigated from dreaming to doing.
I'm going to tell you the origin story of sort of how I started the Flow Research Collective, or how I transitioned from being a guy who wrote about the neuroscience and psychology of peak performance to a guy who runs one of the largest neurobiology research and training companies in the world. I'd started studying flow states in the late 1990s. I got to know most of the scientists. I was mentored by a lot of top scientists, and I was really curious. I was really passionate, and I really did my homework every time I got on the phone with these people. And so I really respected their time, and we got to be friends. And over 15 years, literally, two things happened that started to shift, and I noticed both. One was I spent 15 years trying to get the world's top 9 neuroscientists to start a flow research project inside of whatever academic institution they were in. Every conversation I had, I would try to nudge the neuroscientist I was talking to into doing this. I did not believe I could do it. I was a journalist. I'm literally trained as a poet, undergraduate. I'm trained as a fiction writer in graduate school, and my formal training in the work environment, was in journalism and then in book writing. As far as was concerned, I had no business whatsoever starting a neurobiology research project, at all. The second thing that started to become clear to me is, for years, I would call people up and explain a lot of flow stuff and ask them questions. And starting, I don't know, somewhere around 2005, 6 or 7, it went the other way. The top neuroscientists would start calling me, asking me those questions. I started to notice that was happening much more frequently. And I thought, wow, this is odd. Like, what's going on here? And nobody would start a company. Nobody would start the company. And I got invited. This is all backstory. Sorry, you asked a hard
Bring it. We like context.
I was invited to attend. It was one of the first major neuroscience conferences on multitasking. And it was organized by Clifford Ness from Stanford and Michael Gazzaniga, who was then running the National Science Foundation. And it was a heavy hitting room. And I'm not even sure what I was doing in that room, but I was in that room. And I know Michael Gazzaniga a little bit. I'd met him a couple times prior. He's a super nice guy. I got about 5 minutes of his time, and I pitched him the idea that it eventually became the Flow Research Collective, and he just started laughing. He laughed in my face. He's a really nice guy, but he laughed in my face. About 3 weeks later, I was at NASA Ames. I was writing Abundance with Peter Diamandis, and I was doing the research. And I was very stoned, sitting in front of the NASA Lodge, which is where they used to house the astronauts, and it's where tourists stay if they're at Singularity University or they're at the NASA Ames campus. And Andrew Hessel, who is a synthetic biologist, today he runs the Human Genome Write Project, which is the Human Genome Project Part 2. Instead of trying to read a human genome, we're now trying to write a human genome, and he leads that initiative. So he's a brilliant synthetic biologist. And I didn't know Andrew really well, but he walked up, sat down, we started talking. We were going back and forth, and I don't know why, but I told him what happened with Michael Gazzaniga. And he said, I got to tell you something. He said, at the time, Andrew wasn't running the Human Genome Write Project. He was running a synthetic biology nonprofit cancer research initiative. He wanted to build individual cancer drugs. So a cancer drug coded to your genome or my genome. Cancer is a very individual genome disease. Everybody knows that end-to-one medicine is individually customized medicine. Everybody knows this is the future. It's where it's going, especially with diseases like cancer. But Andrew was like 15 years ahead of anybody. And at the time he had this idea, and this is the story he told me, he was working at Amgen. He had a very cushy biopharmaceutical job with a big research budget and a lot of power and a lot of people under him. And all he wanted to do is stay there and start this little wing that would do synthetic biology and cancer research. And it was too controversial. He had to leave the company to start his project. And he told me this story. He said, my point is, you're having the same problem. Academia is way, way too conservative. You want to study an altered state of consciousness for its ability to impact human performance. You can't do it inside of academia. But if you decide to do this on your own, I'll join your board. And I'll bet you if you called a bunch of those neuroscientists back who said no to starting the initiative, I'll bet they'll join your board and do the same. And I remember that was my why not now moment. Right? I remember sitting there and I don't know what I decided. I do remember that a day later, it like just stuck with me. And I picked up the phone and I called my friend James Olds, who runs the Krasnow Institute, which is George Mason's graduate neuroscience institute, studies complexity science, neuroscience. It's a sister institute to the Santa Fe Institute where they study complexity science. And he's a very prominent neuroscientist. His father actually discovered the dopamine receptor, as he likes to say. That little receptor paid for my college education. But I called him and I said, "Hey, James, I've had this crazy experience. What do you think?" And he said, "Stephen, come on. You've been the world's leading expert on this subject for 10 years. We've all been waiting for you to do this. Of course, I'll join your board." And that was where it started. But it was also I'm a punk rocker from Cleveland, Ohio. Like, I don't have business skills. You know what I mean? Like, even when we first met, when I was writing Rise as Superman, I was getting pulled onto Wall Street to do speeches. And I'd go into these rooms and I'd be like, "Do you have any fucking clue who he's talking to you? Like, do you have any idea?" Like, you would throw me out of this room if you knew. And so it took a really long time from that point, you know, until I got to where I am today, because it took I had to get a full education in business. There was a lot of stuff. I had to learn how to run major research initiatives. I've got 70 people working for me now. I had never managed anybody. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that had to get done, but it was that was the why not now moment.
Okay. So what I'm hearing, there was a moment where you were being laughed at, right? And then we transpire over into this moment where you get a yes, I'll help you, I'll be on your board, and then another one. And how are those two connected? What was the time frame there?
Oh, there was 2 weeks. I mean, it was 2 weeks. Oh, and by the way, okay, so here's the next thing. I should tell you how the story ends. I literally sent out an email. I rented the conference room. I was living in LA at the time. I rented the conference room at the now defunct Standard Hotel on Sunset Boulevard. I know that one. Right? Which wasn't cool anymore, right? Everybody was downtown, but there was this freaking great pool, great view, nobody around, really funky. And I rented the conference room and a bunch of hotel rooms, like half a floor and a conference room. And I sent out an email. If you're interested in joining, I'm going to start a formal flow research, something. If you're interested, I've rented these rooms, come show up. And I thought maybe 5 people from LA might show up. People flew in from Hong Kong. I mean, people I didn't know came from all over the place. It was a wackadoodle meeting because we had like spiritual folks over here, hardcore neuroscientists over here. We had.
And what year was this? Was this pre-social media?
This is all 2011. And that was actually where it started. I think the first official business thing I ever had to do was run that meeting.
I love it. And you do come from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, right? So Cleveland, I mean, your punk rock roots, that cracks me up. So you almost had to like retrofit in your business. It sounds like
I had to come to what had really changed on the business front is I had gone to Singularity University, and this is going to sound, I don't know how to say this in a way that doesn't sound cocky, but I was at SU with Andrew Hessel and all those other people doing the research for abundance. And when Peter and Ray first built SU, they built it to be the most elite educational institution known to man. Peter wanted to out MIT. So you had to have you had to have a PhD to get in, and you had to start it and sold a business for at least $1 million. So everybody who was there had already been an entrepreneur. And I would meet all these people, and they were brilliant, wonderful people, but they weren't smarter than me. And they didn't have my social intelligence, which was the thing that I noticed. I was like, holy crap. Like, they may know more physics or whatever, but I know my discipline as well as they know theirs, and they don't have my social intelligence. I was a bartender. I was a journalist. I come from a background. I was taught to talk to everybody. You can drop me in the jungles in Africa or in a ghetto in China, and I'm fine. I'm going to make friends and, be totally fine very quickly, because I learned how to do that for my careers, especially as a journalist. And so that was the other thing that I realized. I was like, wow, I've got skills that they don't have. And I was starting to piece together that business wasn't anything special. I used to think it was a secret thing. It had its own language. It had guys like my father that I didn't understand or get along with too well. Like, it was all very confusing to me. And I love my father. I love my father dearly, but that was back then.
You were probably absorbing and learning subconsciously without realizing it, I'm sure. But having a background in school as journalism, poet, and then writing all of these nonfiction books just cracks me up, because here you are, I think about this common thread. I've been fortunate to interview some incredible individuals like yourself. And one of my favorite questions is to ask, when was the last time you had imposter syndrome? When was the last time you had self-limiting beliefs or doubts? And so there, I'll just tee it up right there. When was the last time you felt that? And what was the situation?
So imposter syndrome, I felt for a very long time, very, very long time. It was not until I want to say I'm 53. It might have been until I was about 50. Like, that I really felt that in a lot of the rooms, as I said, I'm a punk rocker from Cleveland. I've been in a lot of rooms. I've been in the kinds of rooms that I'm not allowed to talk to you about being in, right? Like, a lot of those spaces. And, you spend a long time shaking your head going, what the fuck am I doing here? Right? It doesn't matter that like you can add value. It took me a really long time to really believe that. The other thing that's really important to understand about me is I'm an extreme introvert. So it didn't matter how much my books were going out into the world and having an impact or not having an impact or whatever. I don't pay attention to it. Like, I like to be alone 14 hours a day. I'll go months and months and months where I won't see. If it's ski season and I'm writing a book, I'll see my wife, my ski partner, and nobody else for 4 or 5 months. Right. And like, that's so I don't, you know what I mean? So any impact I was having in the world happened way out of sight. Right. And I still don't believe it. Like, people come up to me and say things like, oh my God, your book changed my life. My first answer is, no, it didn't. You changed your life. Shut up. You know what I mean? Like, and I really do believe that.
About abundance. I mean, abundance. Yeah. Anyway,
it's nice of you to say that, but once again, you changed your life. The book, if it wasn't my book, I think it would probably have been any other 10 things that bumped into you at that particular moment.
Integrating the Shakespearean thoughts that you had to bring forth. So that changed.
It's nice of you to say.
Yeah, I'm not just giving out compliments here. I'm a small town girl from Wyoming who grew up in a trailer park. So I understand this like background thing. But so
let me ask you to answer the second question, because per self-doubt. So for reasons that are too complicated to go into, about a year ago, I decided that I was going to I've been skiing my entire life. I've been chasing professional athletes around mountains my entire life. And I decided at 53 that I was going to learn how to park ski, which I had never done before in my entire life. I've also broken 82 bones. I've had so much surgery. I don't want to have any more surgery. But, and I really decided to step up my game significantly this year. And, I've skied by far the heaviest lines of my life this season. I've learned how to do a bunch of park tricks. My rotator cuff is torn. I've got more bruises on my body right now than you could possibly imagine. And almost every time I go to the ski area, and definitely every time I go to Kirkwood, there's a moment of, oh my God, I'm terrified. I can't do this. And I hate the feeling of fear. It produces tremendous shame in me. If I'm scared of something and I walk away from the challenge of it, that's really, that shame to me is the worst feeling in the world. That's the hardest thing for me to live with, is that I walked away from any challenge, but especially a physical challenge that I sort of wanted to conquer. So that's been really humbling all year, because I've accomplished so many difficult cognitive challenges. I've written 13 books. I've done a lot of stuff that way. I've written, complicated neuroscience papers on topics that I had no business, even being in. And like, I've done a lot of that stuff. So I have a lot of I have massive confidence in my cognitive abilities. My physical abilities, on the other hand, that's a very different story. I'm a very slow learner. I have a very fixed mindset about physical skills. Like, nobody, despite the fact that I chase pros around, like, nobody is slower. Nobody gets worse over time, more slowly or better, more slowly than I do when it comes to physical skills. It's just how I'm wired. The guy I ski with likes to say, we were laughing the other day. He said, you're having the season you always wanted to have when you were 20. And I said, I know. I said, I'm 53. I just have he started laughing. He said, you have a very different timetable for success than most people, which is very true. Once I set a goal, I will die before I stop. Like, you'll have to kill me. If I set a goal, I will finish that goal or I will die. It's just how I'm wired.
Interesting. And I remember, I was fortunate to hear you speak in a pretty intimate setting for the Summit community up in Utah. And you talked about a lot of these elite, intense athletes, and you talked about your experiences and the research. And what clicked for me was, wait, I felt that working. I actually feel that when I'm in the zone working, right? And I'm sure you are familiar with and probably knew in person one of my mentors and one of my first investors, Tony Hsieh, who made it his hobby for a while to study the science of happiness. And the first time I ever heard the word flow was from Tony. We were having a couple margaritas, probably about 14 years ago, and maybe 12. And he talked about the different types of happiness, one of which being rock star, fleeting. I was like, I know about that. I definitely am addicted to that. I've got a black diamond on my wrist. Like, I love to ski and snowboard too. He talked about flow, and then he talked about higher objective. And I had never heard that term flow before. And I'm not your woo-woo gal. Like, I just don't, I'm not that real side of the spectrum, but I kind of put it into this category of flow. Like, are we talking about yoga? Like, what? And he said, no, when you lose your sense of just time because you're enjoying it so much. But then when I heard you talk about it at Summit, it clicked, and it's become this target. Like this, can I get there? How long can we sustain it? First of all, would you agree that those are ingredients of this calculus puzzle of happiness? And is flow 1/3 of it? Or like, what do you even think of that?
I can actually answer. I can sort of semi-answer that question. I had an interesting encounter with Tony Hsieh.
Haven't we all, right?
He is right about that. So positive psychologists have been studying this question for a while. And what we now sort of know is there are essentially 3 levels of happiness that are available to humans. The first is happiness. How are you here, right now, in the moment, the hedonic sense of now. And as a general rule, Dan Harris wasn't wrong. We can be about 10% happier, but because of what are known as emotional set points, basically you're by about age 10 to 12, these are set up. You have a low point and a high point. And the low point is about the worst you're going to feel on the planet, and the high point's the best you're going to feel. And your life takes place in between. Now, they can move. The low points, we used to think they didn't move at all. We now know they can move. For sure, with death of a child or chronic unemployment will make the low point go lower. So that can make it worsen. But other than that, doesn't seem to be the case. And regular and repeated access to flow, or possibly more other altered states of consciousness, flow for sure can push it up higher over time, which gets me to my next point. So daily gratitude practice, daily mindfulness practice, regular exercise. You know what I mean? Get plenty of sleep at night. Like, we know what to do here. It's not fancy. The next level up is often called enjoyment or engagement. This is a high flow lifestyle, period. High flow lifestyle. This could be, guy who works carpentry in the summer so he can ski all winter in Jackson Hole. Or this could be, a professional athlete. It could be a coder. Coding is an incredibly high flow job. Any artist, any creative, any athlete. These are all very high flow jobs. But truthfully, so is everything. The most common flow state on earth is two middle managers talking at work and or reading, or a person reading. Those are the most common flow states on earth, are middle managers in conversation, where you cut into a conversation with somebody and get so sucked into that an hour goes by and didn't even notice. That's really common. So is reading, where you get you're in reading flow, not when you're just sucked into the book, but it's when your ideas start to spiral. When the book's ideas merge with your ideas and you have those creative spirals, that's a reading flow state.
I get that when I'm running.
So same, maybe it's not the runner's
same spectrum. And it's a spectrum, by the way. Microflow on one end, macro flow on the other. It's like anger, right? Little irked, homicidally murderous, same emotion. Microflow, right? You get flow. What psychologists define flow, they define it by 6 core initial conditions. So complete concentration in the present moment, time dilation, which is time passing strangely, merger of action awareness, vanishing of self and self-consciousness, a sense of control, that we can control. Performance goes up so much in flow, we feel like we have control over uncontrollable events. And then finally, the state is autotelic, an end in itself, which is a fancy way of saying it's euphoric. It's the most addictive experience on earth, which is why it makes up this second level enjoyment, this high flow lifestyle. Then,
can you run that without psychedelics?
What, a high flow lifestyle?
Yeah.
I don't think you need psychedelics at all for a high flow lifestyle. Why would psychedelics don't have anything to do with that?
No, it just sounds very like it sounds.
A high flow lifestyle is no. I mean, it's literally I live a high flow lifestyle. I ski regularly and I write regularly. Writing drops me into flow. Skiing drops me into flow. That's a high flow lifestyle. Nothing fancy going on.
Our minds wanted to
live a high flow lifestyle, right? So that's engagement. One level up, what they say is the best we get to feel on the planet is meaning and purpose. It's when your high flow lifestyle, where the thing that drives flow is attached to a cause greater than yourself. And that's the best we get to feel on the planet. So by that definition, flow is 2/3 of our definition of happiness, right? And
because you got both of those. Got it.
But it's really worth pointing something out. So flow, if you want more flow states have triggers, right? Preconditions that lead to more flow. The most important is the challenge skills balance. Flow follows focus. It only shows up when all our attention is in the right here, right now. We pay the most attention to the task at hand when the challenge of that task slightly exceeds our skill set. You want to stretch, but not snap, right? So what does this tell us? This tells us that if you're going to live a high flow lifestyle, you're going to be pushing on your skills all the time. You're going to be uncomfortable all the time. One, this tells you if you want, and you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. 2, high engagement and enjoyment are not pleasurable. This is a thing that people screw up a lot. Just happiness. How do you feel right here, right now is so fleeting and so whatever. And if you live a high flow lifestyle, if you live a life with a lot of meaning, a lot of well-being, a lot of overall life satisfaction, all the things that flow provides, you don't have a lot of moment by moment pleasure. You don't have a lot of moment by moment happiness. You have deep contentment and satisfaction and the feeling of a job well done and mastery and all those amazing, amazing feelings. But as a general rule, this from skiing, you're skiing at the top of your ability. When you're not in flow on the hill, when you're on the chairlift, you're in pain. Your legs hurt. You're tired. Everything aches. You're cold. You're miserable. You don't even want to be there. And then you get off the chairlift, you drop back into flow for the run. And you by the time you get down to the bottom, you're like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. And by the time you get back up, you're like, oh my God, I want to kill myself. I feel so awful, right? That's really common. It's common in writing. I had an amazing writing flow state this morning. But before I got there, oh my God, I was beating my head against the floor. Yeah, I hit 10 bestseller lists 2 weeks ago, and I was beating my head against the floor this morning going, you don't know how to write. You don't know how to write. You don't know how to write, And then I had an amazing flow state.
Which is amazing. I mean, the fact that you just said, and following all of your journey in your books, and you just said, I woke up this morning and I had worst writing session. And I was like, you don't even know how to write. And The Art of the Impossible and what you've written and done, it just goes to show like some feelings seem to be so fleeting and we have to kind of get back in. Would you say, here's another thing, not to bring it back to Tony Hsieh, but it sounds like there's an interesting
tell you the story
there.
Yeah,
I want to hear it, but only if it's, he's not here at the moment to
defend himself.
I
was at one of the early downtown Vegas events. He had
which I used to live there. I was one of the first companies that he invested in.
Tony was standing on a stage and giving a talk about the project, which I thought was amazing, except for one thing, which is what I said to Tony. I said, excuse me, Tony, you're building a city in the middle of a fucking desert. What are you going to do about water, right? Water security, water scarcity, these are critical environmental issues. And he said, well, we can solve water. And I said, how do you know? He said, well, there's this book called Abundance that my friend Peter wrote. And I literally looked at him. I was like, Tony, do you have a fucking clue who I am? Like, it's my book. You're quoting my book back at me. And I'm telling you, as the guy who wrote the environmental water sections, that your plan's a fucking disaster and the city's amazing, but get a real water plan. And he didn't like it at all.
But you know what? I bet he respected a lot of that opportunity to learn. Your perception of maybe he didn't like it, I think that's fascinating. Here you are.
Really awkward moment. And I don't think people swear at Tony in public very often. You know what I mean?
I love that story though, so much. So much. And
I love the Downtown Vegas project. I don't know Tony at all. This was literally, we talked a little bit after that.
Was that your only interaction?
It was my only interaction. Jim Quick brought me there or something like that.
Okay. Gotta love him. He taught me how to speed read. He's been on this show. But he used to talk a lot about perceived, you were talking about, progress and just the perceived progress and just how I sense this with my team and I throughout our days. If we're feeling a sense of perceived progress, it doesn't even have to be real. We're good. Like we're good.
Oh, you have no idea how good you are, or you do have no idea how good you are, but like the science backs up your idea. By the way, that horrible sound in the background, that is my dog drinking out of a water bowl, and I can't make him stop. So
it humanizes you.
Oh, good. As if the swearing didn't already. So we have 5 major intrinsic motivators, right? Internal motivators, drivers: curiosity, passion, purpose, autonomy, and mastery. And really, to perform at your best, if you're interested in that high-low lifestyle, they need to be all pointed in the same direction, right? Curiosity is biologically designed to be built into passion, which is biologically designed to be coupled to a cause greater than ourselves, which gives us purpose. Once a system has purpose, it needs autonomy. I want the freedom to pursue my purpose. And once you have that freedom, we demand biologically mastery, which is the skills to pursue that purpose well. But they talk about mastery as sort of the master motivator, because it gives us the biggest rewards, the most dopamine, the most pleasure. Stuart Brand once said that the satisfaction of a job well done is the only sustainable happiness. And I think he's from a happiness, not engagement, enjoyment, or purpose, but I think he's right about that. A, and B, we love the feeling of progress towards a meaningful goal more than any other feeling. We will actually, over time, take it over sex. We might take sex or drugs in the moment, right? But over time, mastery will always, we will take it over any other pleasure, mostly because for a survival perspective, from an evolutionary survival perspective, getting better at the skills that you need to survive, nothing is better for your survival. So it's incredibly well motivated. Right. Yeah. So you're totally right about it. And yeah, there's nothing more fun than progress towards a meaningful goal. Actually, I take that back. Progress towards impossible goals are more fun, but just a little.
Oh man, this is good. What gets you out of bed in the morning? What gives you positive energy, Stephen? Oh, you guys. So one, I love almost every single thing about my life. So I love writing. I mean, I wake up every morning
Benjamin Zinder, the composer, once said that the best thing about practice, he was a pianist, is you get to see where the notes take you. And I think the best thing about writing is I get to see where the words are going to take me, right? Like every day I wake up and my brain is going to take me on a little trip, right? And if it's a good trip, which it often is, it's going to take me someplace surprising, right? It's going to take me someplace surprising, right? Someplace I didn't expect to go, and I'm going to learn something about myself, and that's interesting. So I love that. I'm a very I do the same thing every single day. I mean, the only question is what season is it? So if it's am I going mountain bike riding or skiing or surfing? Right. In my days that I do action sports, everything else is always the same. It doesn't change. I do the same thing, and I really do love it. Took a lot of years to get there, but
And you've designed it that way, though. Like, I think that's what's interesting is you don't just land into that.
No, of course. I mean, isn't the only look? There's only one game in town, which is You Bet Your Life, right? That's the only game worth playing. And two, the point of all that is that if your life is an art and your art isn't your life, what are you doing here? In a sense, I don't mean that in an asshole-ish way. I mean it as I don't actually get it. Like, if you're not trying to turn your life into art at all times and really sculpt what you want to see in the world, and this could be ethically, morally, intellectually, creative. I don't care. I don't know what other game you came for. I don't know how you get through the day. I couldn't do it. Right. That helps me get through that. It's hard here, even when you're living your dream life, of course. Right. It was hard before. It's still hard. It's hard for everybody. It's just hard here on planet Earth, or difficult and challenging. But to try to turn that challenge into something beautiful and interesting. And by the way, when I say art, I mean what Bukowski meant. To do a dangerous thing with style is what I call art. And that's sort of when you talk about turning your life into art, that's sort of how I think about it.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. I'm hopping in here to tell you about a new discovery of mine. I'm in love, and let me tell you, I've fallen hard. We all like our caffeine in the morning. I look forward to that first, second, and fifth cup of coffee in the morning. But now I exclusively drink Super Coffee. I'm such a fan that I actually invested in the company, the team, and their culture. The love for what I do every day makes me jump out of bed in the morning, but Super Coffee truly fuels that fire. It's fueled with positive energy, from the ingredients they use to their brand promise. Super Coffee removes the negatives like sugar and adds the positives like MCT oil and protein so that you can maximize your day. I have an embarrassing secret. I used to be addicted to diet soda. I'd roll out of bed and pop open a can before my eyes were even fully open. I had never been a huge coffee drinker, but when I gave up diet soda on July 12th, 2015, yes, the moment deserves an anniversary. It was a big deal. I needed another caffeine source at that point. For me, that meant coffee with lots of artificial sweeteners, with crazy ingredients I can't pronounce that made me crash by 2 p.m. or so. Well, not anymore. Super Coffee is different. As I mentioned, there's no added sugar, and some of the flavors I love have 10 grams of plant protein. Now, I'm not a big meat eater, so this really helps, and they've just added a few new flavors to their plant-based offering, like French vanilla and sweet cream. They only use ingredients that are great tasting, great for you, and sustain you for the long haul. Nothing shady, only positives. The taste is delish, I can tell you. Take it from someone who needs that extra flavor to enjoy the taste of coffee. And Super Coffee also comes in ground coffee, Keurig pods, creamers, and more on their website, drinksupercoffee.com. One of the things my team and I love most is that on drinksupercoffee.com, you can shop Super Coffee's wide variety of products based on your dietary needs, including gluten-free, plant-based, Whole30, keto, or even vegan, right there on their website. There's something for everyone. While you're on the site, go ahead and stock up because Super Coffee is hooking up Why Not Now listeners with a 25% discount. Head to supercoffee.com and use the code Why Not Now for your 25% discount on all products. drinksupercoffee.com is the only place this offer is available, and your discount works again for all products. Just use Why Not Now as your code, all one word. There are no restrictions. I'm an investor in Super Coffee because the founders truly do walk the talk. Yes, their coffee provides positive energy, but so does their company culture. Their founders are three brothers who share a work hard and be nice to people mentality, and they spread that throughout their culture at Super Coffee. They know the importance of having diverse perspectives at the leadership level. And you know, I'm a fan of elevating women in leadership. In fact, one of my Renegade Accelerator grads, Jamie Christ, is one of those women. So once that positive energy arrives on your doorstep, hit me up on social at Amy Jo Martin and show me what flavors and products you went with. And bonus points if you try one of their seasonal blends. The company is growing quickly, and you'll probably start noticing Super Coffee in your local Walmart, Target, or Costco. They are now in over 30,000 retailers nationwide. To take advantage of your exclusive 25% discount, head to drinksupercoffee.com and enter Why Not Now at checkout. That's Why Not Now, all one word. drinksupercoffee.com is the only place this offer is available, and your discount works for all products, no restrictions.
So if we look at flow, and you are a master, you are the ultimate authority of flow state and flow and research, and in a way, is it accurate to say if you can reach flow, you can hack productivity and time management in a way? Like this is.
So yeah, it's a great question. Let me start by saying I appreciate that. I think I'm one of a bunch of flow experts, right? Maybe not and especially because Mike Mihai Csikszentmihalyi is still alive. So, but let's clarify a few terms. Peak performance. What do we mean by peak performance? Peak performance is nothing more or less than getting our biology to work for us rather than against us. Now, that biology, especially if we're talking about cognitive peak performance and not physical stuff, is a limited set of skills. There are 4 skill sets that sit inside that, which is sort of at the heart of the new book, The Art of Impossible. There is motivation skills, there are learning skills, there are creativity skills, and there are flow skills. And each of those terms are catch-alls. So when I say motivation, or when psychologists say motivation, they mean extrinsic motivation, things out in the world that we want: money, sex, fame. Intrinsic motivation, this is curiosity, passion, purpose, autonomy, mastery, goal setting, and grit. So it's a bunch of things that fit under that heading. Same thing with learning, same things with creativity and flow. But the point is, and the way you should think about it is, in any situation, in any peak performance situation, motivation gets you into the game. Learning is what allows you to continue to play. Creativity, especially if you're going after any kind of hard goals that are, difficult to see where they are exactly. Creativity, creative problem solving is how you steer. And flow, because it is optimal performance, and every single human being on the planet is hardwired to get into flow. It's available to everybody. Flow is how you turbo boost the results beyond all reasonable expectations. And the amplification we get in flow at the end, if you get all this stuff right, you ask, can you hack motivation and productivity with flow? Flow significantly amplifies motivation, grit, and productivity. In a study by McKinsey, they went around the world talking to top executives. How much more productive do you feel in flow? Now, this was a self-reported study, right? They asked the question, so take it with a grain of salt, but the average after a decade of asking the question was 500% more productive. That means you can go to work on a Monday, spend Monday in flow, take Tuesday through Friday off, and you get as much done as everybody else. So the answer is yes, you can math. I mean, we had this great, I got this great quote. I think it's in Stealing Fire from Richard Branson, who said it's something like, in 2 hours in flow, there is nothing I can't accomplish. And that's pretty much what, I mean, that, you know what I mean? Everybody basically feels that way. I will tell you where that goes wrong, and it goes wrong this way for a lot of like sort of visionary entrepreneurs and things like that. You have time is collapsed in flow. It's because the part of your brain that calculates time, prefrontal cortex, is turned off. We lose the ability to separate past, present, from future, plunge into what people talk about as the deep now. Thing is, intuition, insight, creativity, innovation, all this stuff is maximized in flow. So you see farther over your life. You have big ideas. Composer can see an entire symphony in their head in flow, right? And because there's no time in flow, literally the brain isn't processing time, he could think, or she could think, oh, I can drop out of flow and I'll be done with this opera in a week. And when you come back to reality, it's actually a decade's worth of work. So this derails a lot of visionary entrepreneurs. They have these huge visions. Tony Hsieh is a great example, had this huge vision in the desert of what could be possible. And then he literally spent the rest of his life trying to make it work, right?
Is it that reality gets warped as well?
Our time horizons get warped in flow, and we think the gap from A to B, because the idea came so easily in flow. Of course, the real manifestation, and of course, welcome back to your reality. Like, this is still planet Earth, where we pointed out it's hard here, right? Like, so that's very difficult for a lot of people. That they like, the productivity goes way up in flow. And yes, if you could live in flow, kind of thing, maybe you could get it done in a week. But it doesn't, that's just not how it tends to work in the real world. And everybody will tell you that whatever vision you have in flow, you ought to fact check when you're out of flow.
Interesting.
For sure.
Makes so much sense. So have you ever discovered a relationship between confidence and flow?
Yeah, perfect relationship. It's not my discovery. The first time I read about it was Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi and Gene Nakamura, who wrote the paper on it that I read. But so I mentioned earlier the challenge skills balance. There was a question that psychologists started to ask, 30 years ago. Neuroscientists, we've been asking it for about 10 years, trying to figure it out from a neurobiological mechanistic perspective. But psychologists 20 years ago, 30 years ago said, well, what the hell do you mean by challenge and what do you mean by skills? Like, what is it? Okay, we know, like, what exactly goes into that? And there are 8 categories, I want to say 8, might be 7, of things that actually feed into challenge and skills. One of which is confidence. In fact, confidence in athletes, when other things are equal in top athletes, confidence is actually 81% of the equation. It's amazing. But normally, under normal circumstances, cultural background comes into play here. So does economics. So does, though they don't come into play the way you would think they do, poor people actually have an easier time getting into flow than wealthy people, it turns out. But ability to delay gratification matters. Tolerance for anxiety and uncertainty matters. I'm forgetting a couple others. Optimism is one of the others that I'm forgetting. And there's really good neurobiological reasons for all this stuff. And it's just basically, if you got to think about whenever you encounter a situation, a problem, a challenge, is it a threat or is it a challenge? Is it a threat or is it a challenge? So there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. Confidence plays a pretty big role there.
When it comes to one thing that you find yourself learning over and over, what do you got?
Meaning the same lesson over and over again, like the mistake that I make over and over and over again.
Yep, that one. It
changes. Here's the one I've been making most recently. And I make this as a leader with my team, which is, so I'm foundationally very, very cooperative. And even as a boss, I like to hire the smartest, most creative people I possibly can, get the fuck out of the way, right? That's how I'm wired. And the lesson I keep learning over and over and over again as a leader is, if I have a bad intuition, like I have to act on it immediately, talk about it immediately. I can't because my normal instinct is I'm working with a team member and they're like, I've got this great idea. I want to try this, blah, 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 blah. And and then 3 months will go by, they'll try it. And of course it won't be the thing I want, because I knew 3 months ago that I wanted this thing and it was a bad idea, but I'm cooperative by nature and want to get the hell out of the way for smart, creative people and let them do their thing. And you can't do that when you're the boss, because first of all, it's demotivating to the person who just spent 3.5, right? I knew 3 months ago that this was a no, right? Like, so that's the one that I keep learning over and over and over again the past 2 to 3 years is, as the boss, it's when I have a bad feeling, we have the self-awareness to go, that's that gut instinct that this is a no-go. And you got to tell them right then and there, because otherwise you're wasting people's time. You're disrespecting them. And I know exactly what I want, right? If I've got that feeling, it means I know exactly what I want and I think I'm right. And I'm not going to be satisfied with any other solution until I see that mine has failed. Right? Mm-hmm. Like mine may fail, that's fine.
But if they do, it compounds over time and it makes the failure worse.
Yeah. So there's a lot of those, right? But that's one that that's a hard one for me because it goes against kind of my fundamental, collaborative, let's make something great together kind of, I'm as collaborative as an introvert can be, but I'm collaborative over Zoom.
I love it. That's a good blend. That's good. That's a nice compromise. So if you were to go back, Stephen, and you were to meet yourself in that moment before you were being laughed at for your idea, right? So back
I didn't take that personally, by the way. I did. I mean, no, I really did. Okay.
Clearly not. Clearly 2 weeks later, you're.
Yeah.
But what advice would you give to yourself in that moment if you could go back and say, all right,
that's a really tough, people like to ask that question a lot. Like if you could go back and talk to your former, you know what I mean? And I don't think I would change anything. I wish somebody would have told me the one thing I wish I would have learned much younger, which I think everybody sooner or later figures out, is sooner or later you realize your life is going to be nothing more or less than you make of it. Right? Like that's a hard realization for a lot of people, but you're like, oh, wow. I am the only one who gives a fuck here. And I am the only one who's going to make a difference. It's all on you, right? Like that's an eye-opening one. But I also, this is the thing in peak performance. There's literally no secret, right? As I said, there's 6 things to do every day, about 7 things to do every week. And this is based on our biology. This is the best that science can tell us right now. And it works incredibly well, especially if you want more flow in your life, blah, blah, blah. But it's every day. It's like peak performance is a checklist, but you got to do the checklist today, tomorrow, the next day, the next day, the next day, the next day. It works like compound interest, and you got to do it for years until you start seeing the results. And the fact that there's no secret, that it's literally just show up, do the job, and don't care about outcome, right? I show up, I write every day. I don't care if it's good or it's bad. That's somebody else's job later on. My job is to put 500 words on the page or 1,000 words on the page. Then my job is to get on a phone call and try to run the best meeting I can run, right? I don't set outcome goals. I set process goals. Best meeting I can run, best 500 words I can write, best blah, blah, blah. And you do that over and over and over and over again. And that's how you get to impossible. And it's so hard to believe that. It's so hard to believe that. It doesn't, it goes against everything, right? There are no shortcuts and there's nothing but the work. My friend, Andrew Huberman, who teaches at Stanford, we do some work with him. He's a neuroscientist. He does a lot of work like ourselves with U.S. Special Forces. And he said something super interesting that I think is relevant here towards this thing, which is the thing that every peak performer knows that most normal people don't know is that it's always crawl, walk, run. When most normal people get into something, they're like, "Oh, dude, I don't crawl. I'm not a guy who crawls, and I'm going to figure out what's the shortcut so I can start at a jog." Peak performers, they show up and they know it's going to be crawl, walk, run, right? And for learning's the same for everybody. It's I suck. Oh, look, I don't suck, right? It doesn't that doesn't change. It doesn't matter how good you get at whatever. It's always the same experience. Crawl, walk, run. And it's funny because Andrew and I were talking about this. But you meet peak performers, and a common reaction, one way or another, is, "Oh my God, they're so far ahead of me. How did they get there?" And one of the ways they got there is they didn't spend any time looking for shortcuts. It showed up and they went, "Oh, okay, crawl, walk, run. I'm going to suck until I don't suck, and that's just how it is. And I'm not going to waste any time looking for an easier way, a different way, or whatever. I'm just going to lean in and get busy."
Ah, so true. It's amazing how much time we can waste and how many circles we can spin looking for shortcuts. And then we're like, damn, if I just would have started back then, while, crawling. And wow, thank you so much for joining me, for your time and your wisdom. And, I continue to read the journey that you're on. I'm curious if a fiction book, have you written any fiction?
My first book is a novel. I put out a novel 2 years ago called Last Tango in Cyberspace, and I write cyberpunk thrillers. If you've ever read William Gibson or near-term future sci-fi that is kind of a little noirish, like detective noirish, Maltese Falcon, Big Sleep, kind of, but set in sci-fi world.
There we go.
I have another. The next novel drops in November. It's called The Devil's Dictionary. You can buy it on Amazon now. Come on, people, pre-order my new novel, The Devil's Dictionary.
What a good title! That's such a good title. Oh,
Devil's Dictionary. Yeah, absolutely. I'm game. I'm gonna give it a spin. I'd love to read some of your fiction. And thank you again for your time. This has been awesome.
My pleasure. Thank you, Amy Jo.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?